if you basically add, I don't know how much it costs to add, I don't know, a certain amount of megawatts in the UK, and a builder should expect to make, I don't know, a fair return on that invested capital. I don't know if it's 7-8%, and that should spit out your long-term spread. And this is the way to think about it, you think?
No, again, coming back to no, yes and no, not quite. Again, coming back to my option pricing formula, we've kind of gone through a large part of the intrinsic value, the fixed spread, if you like, between prices in France and prices in GB. And again, because electricity markets are half hourly and vary through the day, you want to take a little bit more of a look in that, because while you might have a big price spread for exporting from France to GB during the day, say, it may be different overnight when demand and prices are fundamental. And that was certainly the case, certainly is the case, and was the case with the Irish interconnectors. It always made sense to import from GB during the day, but quite often you wouldn't be using the capacity, or you'd be exporting from Ireland overnight. So there is a time dimension as well you've got to look at in the spread there. But the other aspects in that option pricing formula we talked about was the volatility and the correlation between the two markets. And increasingly what we're seeing in electricity markets is a rise in volatility. And that rise in volatility is really being driven by the introduction, the increased penetration of wind generation and other intermittent renewables. So the French market is relatively less affected by that because, as we say, they have this fundamental large block of baseload nuclear power generation. But increasingly in GB, and even more exaggerated over in the island of Ireland, you can see times when there are large surpluses in wind power generation. And during those times where there is more wind generation than there is demand for electricity in the country, you can see prices in the market going negative. And as we've seen in the past month over in Ireland, they can actually go very negative. So even down to minus €1,000 a megawatt hour in some instances. So that increase in volatility can be driving an increase in the value of interconnection, and particularly where the correlation between the markets is not necessarily very strong. Again, where you had a spread between the Irish market and the British market, both markets were driven by effectively the same gas price. So if there was a price rise in the British market because the gas price had gone up, there'd be a price rise in the Irish market, and that doesn't give you a very strong increase in value for an interconnection. But if you have a situation where the wind blows very strongly across Britain, but not across France, then you can have a very large negative price in Britain, but with no change in the price in France. And there you'll get quite a large increase in interconnector value, because the interconnector gives you ability to take that electricity that you're effectively being paid for and to sell it into the French market, where they'll pay for consuming it on top of what you've already been paid for. So, as well, looking out into the future, as well as looking at the fundamentals that are driving that spread and valuing interconnector, you have to look at what's the correlation going to be between the markets, and how is that volatility going to change. And most people, and probably myself included, would tend to see that the volatility in the prices is going to be an ongoing feature. We're always going to have intermittent renewables on the supply side, as well as changing demand on the demand side. So having the ability to move electricity between markets across the continent can be very